Hello, everyone. Today we're going to be moving on to our next topic, which is called armatures. Now, we've got a couple of problems with our current ability to animate in Blender. Right now, when we want to insert a keyframe, we've got very limited structure to what we can do. So I can always change the location, the rotation, and scale of an object, but I can't really bend or move the object itself. One thing that you guys have been asking me in class is, can I keyframe the shape of an object so that when my object shape changes, it shows up in the animation. We're going to move one step closer to that today by using what are called armatures. Now, armatures you can also think of as skeletons, and if we go to our Create menu, we can see that one of our options is an armature. Now, an armature or skeleton is applied to an object to be able to allow it to bend and twist and change its shape slightly. So it adds structure or rigid movement to our mesh. So what I'm going to do today is I'm going to show you a very simple example where I take a cube and I'm going to extrude that cube upwards, and I'm going to create a joint in the middle of the cube so that it bends. And then once we create that joint and move it around, I'm going to create a short animation to show you how to animate armatures. So the first thing we need to do is take this cube and stretch it a little bit so we have something to work with. Now there's a really important thing to remember about armatures. And I'm going to show you by starting off by creating our cube. I'm going to go into face select, I'm going to grab this face, and I'm going to move it upward a little bit. Now let's say right here is about where I want my object to bend. So I want this to be the middle of my cube. If I'm going to do that, I need to have extra vertices where the bending is going to happen. So I want to extrude, pull it up a little bit. So now you can see I've got another little layer of vertices here. And I'm going to scale it in just so we can see it. And then I'm going to extrude again. So we get another set of vertices. And then I'm going to extrude again and scale it back out. So I've created this joint right here, or this little area of tightly clustered vertices that I can use to bend my shape. So without these extra vertices here, my armature would not work the way I expect it to. Anytime I want a shape to bend or twist, I need to make sure that there are extra vertices at that location. So I should be extruding several times in the spots where I want my shape to bend. Now finally, I'm going to extrude it the rest of the way, and just so it looks a little bit more interesting, I'm going to curve it in. And this is the thing that I'm going to make move. I'm going to add an armature to this particular object, and I'm going to have it bend in the middle here where I've created all these extra vertices. So I'm going to get out of edit mode. One thing that you guys have noticed is that if I create stuff while I'm in edit mode, then I'm going to run into a problem where the thing that I create gets added to the object. I don't want that. So anytime I create something new, I want to make sure I am in object mode. All right, so I'm in object mode. Let's go ahead and add our armature so that we can create or make this shape bend. So I'm going to do Shift A, and I'm going to add an armature. And notice that my options are single bone. That's fine. I'm going to go ahead and add this single bone armature, and I'm going to do some manipulating to move this guy inside my object. Kind of like this. So now, one thing that you guys have discovered by accident is the wireframing view. So I'm going to press Z to change to wireframe so I can see what's going on here. And I can see that I've got it located the right way in one plane, but not in another. Let's move this guy into the middle of my object. Good. Now I've got this bone in the middle of my object. Now there's an important thing to understand about armatures. Each end of the armature represents a joint or a link. So you want to think about the actual human skeleton when you think about armatures and bones. A single bone by itself does not bend. We need to add more bones so that they are connected and they bend where they connect. The really nice thing about armatures is that editing them works the same way as editing a shape. If I want to make this guy bigger, then I'm going to go into edit mode. I'm going to pull this up to the top. And what I'm doing, imagine this is one bone. So I want this bone to occupy the same space as the bottom of my shape. Now, at this round spot here, this is where I want my shape to bend. So I want to create another bone so that they join and create a joint. To do that, I'm just going to extrude. So just like I would extrude a shape, by extruding an armature, I create a new bone. And I'm going to bring that just about to the top of my object. That's a little high. I'm going to bring that down a little. And I'm going to move it. Get it nice and lined up here. For those of you that have learned this trick, you can also constrain it to the Z axis while you're extruding it, if that helps you. We just want to make sure this bone is as lined up as possible. So now we should start to see a system that represents the way that we want our mesh to bend. It's got one bone down here, another bone up here, and the two of them are connected in the middle. This connection is where the bending is going to happen. So let's add some notes to our stickies here. We'll add it to child parent because it's kind of related. Armatures. Step 1 is create the bones connected by joints. And we are using extrude to make new bones. That's step 1. So now we've got a skeletal system that represents the shape that we want to bend. Now, step 2 is a little interesting. We are actually going to use a technique we learned about last time. So if we look at child parent, we want to make the shape a child of the armature. So to do this, I'm going to go back into object mode. And remember that we always, if we check our notes, we always check the child first. So I am going to right-click my cube that I extruded, and then holding Shift, I'm going to right-click my armature. Now, this is the big difference. So now we want to make the shape a child of the armature. And when I do that, go back in this window, I'm going to do Control P. But instead of object, which is what we did before, notice that because I'm parenting an armature, I have a few extra options. And I want to choose armature deform with automatic weights. What with automatic weights means is that Blender is going to try to figure out where the bends happen in our shape automatically. And usually Blender will do a pretty good job of doing this. In a later video, I'm going to show you guys how to fix this, but for right now, we just want to very carefully create our armatures so that they line up with any joints that we make in our shape. If I do with automatic weights, that should have stuck. So make the shape of the child an armature, select armature deform with automatic weights. Okay, so we've done that. Now we want to actually move our shape. So the problem is, if I move this guy, it moves my shape because my shape is a child, but I'm not actually moving the individual bones. To do that, I need to use a new mode. So we've had object mode, we've had edit mode. Now we are going to switch to pose mode to move our bones. So if I go down to where it says object mode, I have edit mode, and then I also have pose mode. When I go into pose mode, it lets me select one bone at a time. And when I select that one bone, then I can rotate it using my rotate tool as if it were a mesh. So I'm going to use rotate, and notice that when I do this, it changes my shape. So now my shape is bending along with the bones. Now, obviously, if I bend it too far, weird stuff happens. But if I bend it just a little bit, I get just the movement I want. So I'm going to talk about one more view that we can add here that can be kind of helpful when we don't want to work in X-ray mode. So I'm going to go back into object mode. And I'm also going to press Z to get out of wireframe mode. But now there's a problem. I can't see my armature, right? So I'm going to go to my object properties. And I'm going to go to where it says display. Down here, see this here? And I'm going to select X-ray. And that did not do what I wanted. X-ray. That's showing my bones. X-ray display on option. The object properties. That's what I'm doing. All right, I'm missing it somewhere. So forgive me, guys. This should be showing up outside the shape. Oh, there we go. I can't have both selected. Okay, that makes sense. So notice that I don't have X-ray selected on my object, but I do have X-ray selected on my armature. I just had too many X-rays. So if we select X-ray on our armature, now it'll show up inside of our object. So if I go back into pose mode and I rotate this guy around, I can see how my object changes. Now, the nice thing about this is as long as we're in pose mode, we can create an animation that allows us to make our cube move. So I want to make my cube wiggle back and forth a little bit. And so all I need to do that is create my keyframes. So I want my cube to kind of start leaning over here. And I'm going to do I, and I'm going to insert. Notice that what I did to make this happen was I rotated the bone, right? I made a rotation at this joint that my object would lean. So I'm going to insert a rotation keyframe. And notice that those guys show up over here. So now I'm going to move up 30 frames. I'm going to rotate it to the right. And then I'm going to insert another rotation keyframe. Now, one thing that a lot of students forget about, notice that I am in pose mode. So for this to be able to work, pose mode has to be the mode that I'm working in to be able to move my armatures. Now I'm going to move up to 60, and I'm going to move my shape back. So now with those three keyframes, we see that our shape wiggles back and forth. One thing really important to note about armatures, they are invisible. So even if this armature is poking out of my shape, it will not show up in the final animation. Armatures are just there to affect the way that our shapes move. They don't actually physically show up. So they're not part of our animation, they just allow us to control our objects. So remember these helpful steps. We want to create our bones and armatures first, and then we're going to make parent-child relationships with the objects that we want to deform. And then pose mode allows us to actually move these guys around. Tomorrow, I'm going to be giving you a mesh that you get to work with that's already been made. All you guys have to do is add the armatures and then create an animation to go along with it. Hopefully this was helpful, and this gives you guys some ideas of more complicated animations that you can make beyond just moving and rotating and scaling our shapes. We now have a way of deforming and bending and curving our shapes that we couldn't do before. Thanks for watching.